My name is Hazel. My husband, Fred, and I are the same age. We got married when we were both 27. Truth be told, Fred was the only person I ever considered marrying in my life. It's not that I never had a boyfriend before, but my family comes from a unique lineage which brought its own set of challenges. In fact, my father's side of the family is wealthy. To put it simply, our household belongs to the affluent class. Aside from a spacious main residence, we own several houses, and just the rental income from an apartment we own brings in over $9,000 a month. On top of that, there's also the passive income from trading, and I remember having several helpers around the house since I was young. Being born into such a family meant that most men who approached me were after the money. Let me be clear, I personally don't have that much money. My father, despite being wealthy, never lavishly handed money over to me, his daughter. On the contrary, I was raised with quite strict financial discipline. So my allowance was around $5 a month as a child, and once I reached high school, I was told to get a part-time job if I wanted money. I haven't received an allowance since then. I thought my sense of money was normal because of this, but it seems that wasn't how others saw it. The most memorable instance was when a boyfriend in college, who was older, said, "Any guy who marries you is going to be lucky. He wouldn't have to work a day in his life." At the time, I thought that was absurd, but every man who knew about my family background approached me with the same idea. Gradually, I stopped hanging out with acquaintances and decided to move out of my hometown to New York. Expanding my social circle without mentioning my family background, I finally realized how much easier it was. That's when I met my current husband, Fred. Back then, I was just a regular office worker at a company. Of course, I kept my family background a secret from my husband, but he approached me, saying he had fallen in love at first sight, and we started dating, albeit somewhat reluctantly on my part. However, I couldn't shake off my financial insecurities and let slip one day, given the times, we'd have to both work, and I guess one child is all we could manage. But my husband, with a gentle smile, proposed out of the blue, "Money is something I'll take care of. I'll earn plenty and make sure you and our child are happy. Please marry me." I remember feeling oddly happy about that. He proposed to me, seeing me for who I am, not for the wealth my family possesses. Thinking about it made me so happy I burst into tears, and that's how we came to be married. Then, at the age of 29, I gave birth to our daughter. Having been asked by my husband to stay home, I quit my job. Now, 10 years have passed, and both my husband and I are 39, in the last year of our 30s. Lately, I've been harboring a concern. I suspect my husband might be having an affair. The truth is, ever since our daughter was born, our relationship has drastically deteriorated. Everything was fine until the pregnancy was discovered, but after our daughter's arrival, the financial burden heavily weighed on my husband. I wanted to breastfeed, but couldn't produce enough milk, so we had to rely on formula. Formula cost us about $50 a month, and diapers were also a significant expense. This led to our first argument. "You should be breastfeeding instead of using formula." A coworker said using formula is just laziness on the mother's part. Besides, breastfeeding is free compared to spending $50 a month on formula, he complained. I snapped back, "I can't help it if I don't produce enough milk. What's wrong with relying on formula?" From that argument on, our conversations dwindled. My husband remained busy with work, leaving household and childcare entirely to me, a stay-at-home mom. Even when our daughter cried, he would say things like, "Her crying is so annoying." As a mother, I couldn't forgive him, and I stopped trying to reconcile. Thus, time cruelly passed with barely any communication between us, and before we knew it, 10 years had gone by. Then, one day, a hint of another woman appeared. After a night out, my husband drunkenly left his suit at the entrance, and as I sighed and picked it up, a business card fell out. It was from a club or some sort, with a woman's name written in cursive, something I couldn't quite make out. Though I knew my husband, being in sales, often went to bars and cabarets for work, bringing home a woman's business card was a first. In fact, my husband looks down on women, harboring a deeply patriarchal mindset. He seemed to believe that women should quietly take care of the house and be obedient to men, especially looking down on women who work in the nightlife, treating them with contempt. Once, after a drinking party, my husband demanded a pickup and ranted in front of me about hostesses. They're ugly yet can't even support a man properly. What a joke. Plus, they have such high pride. Should just praise guests, but they get mad if I touch them. Honestly, I had reached the point where I didn't care about him anymore, and though I just responded vaguely, as a woman, it still irked me. Maybe that's why he had never brought home a business card from a hostess before. I was shocked to hear that he usually discarded them right in front of the hostesses, but this beautiful business card just couldn't get out of my mind, compelling me to suspect his infidelity. A month later, I had tried several times to confront him about the business card but couldn't bring myself to do it, especially not in front of our 10-year-old daughter. However, when my daughter was away at a camp for an extracurricular activity, leaving the house empty for a day, my husband finally broached the subject of his affair. "Let me introduce her, this is Linda. She's my girlfriend," he said. He had been out since morning but suddenly returned with an unknown woman by his side. The name on that business card was Linda, too. Yes, my worst fears had been confirmed. "And why are you introducing her to me?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Linda burst out laughing. "Isn't it obvious? We're planning to remarry, so we thought it'd be best if you and Fred divorced." Though I somewhat anticipated it, such a straightforward development was beyond my imagination. I expected more of a dramatic, messy confrontation, so this was a bit anticlimactic. But having found the business card, I had braced myself for this, so I responded with composure. "Is that so? Then, I'll be requesting an appropriate settlement from you too. Is that all right with you?" I said, looking at my husband. He snorted and said, "I don't want an old, ugly hag anyway. Here, sign the divorce papers," pushing a divorce petition he had filled out at some point. However, I merely accepted it, saying, "I won't sign this immediately, but let's proceed with the divorce. Also, this house isn't just ours, it belongs to our daughter too. Please find somewhere else for yourselves," with a mechanical, indifferent demeanor. My husband scoffed and confidently left, arm around Linda. At that moment, I collapsed, knees buckling, as all strength left my body. Though I had put on a brave face, I was on the verge of a breakdown. I had a fleeting desire to slap Linda, but the last bit of rationality held me back. Causing a scene would only give them satisfaction. So, I pretended not to be fazed, planning to hit them where it hurt with a substantial claim. A year later, after negotiations through a lawyer, our divorce was finalized. I filed a claim against my ex-husband, including for Linda, and received a lump sum for child support, about half of the total amount demanded. After explaining the situation to my daughter, who chose to stay with me, we now live together in an apartment. One day, after work, I stopped by a famously cheap supermarket, feeling a gaze from behind. Initially ignoring it, the sensation became too unsettling, so I turned around to find my ex-husband and Linda. They were holding hands, and a maternity tag dangled from Linda's bag. Realizing they had remarried and she was pregnant, I quickly looked away, but then my ex-husband sneered, "Look at that, living off someone else's taxes and shopping at the supermarket?" Amidst the stares of others, I continued to ignore them, but Linda provocatively said, "Wow, ignoring your ex-husband because he dumped you is pretty harsh." Though annoyed, I faced my ex-husband and asked, "Living off someone else's taxes? What do you mean by that?" He burst out laughing loudly, with Linda also mocking me, tears of laughter in her eyes. Confused, my ex said, "Heard you're on welfare? Must be tough after our divorce, making your daughter suffer too." I was perplexed, having had no contact with my ex and sharing no mutual acquaintances. Clearly, they were under some misunderstanding but continued to taunt me. "You must be desperate, living like this. You've aged like a pensioner, and let's face it, women are no good once they're not young anymore. Having a child really does ruin a woman, doesn't it?" he said. Hearing this, Linda chuckled, but other shoppers my age and mothers with children looked on disapprovingly. Even with Linda pregnant and nearing childbirth, I wondered if my ex could say the same about her. I sighed in dismay, seeing his words as nothing more than thoughtless blabber, and he became visibly upset, exclaiming, "Don't sigh in front of me. It'll chase away happiness, causing a scene." Feeling sorry for causing a disturbance in the store and to the people around, I decided to speak the truth to shut him up. Look, who are you mistaking me for? Unfortunately for you, we're not struggling for money and we're not on welfare. And if giving birth means a woman is no longer a woman, then what about Linda, right? This left my ex-husband stunned, and Linda, realizing she too was insulted by his logic, turned bright red. Watching the foolish pair, I couldn't help but chuckle, but maintained my composure and said, far from needing welfare, I'm confident I pay more taxes than you. Actually, my father passed away recently. My mother's been ill and left me in charge of the finances, saying I should manage the money and properties. So, I just inherited about $5 million worth of assets from him. The mention of $5 million got a reaction out of my ex-husband. Initially, he didn't believe me, saying, "You're lying, right?" But as I continued with realistic details, he started to realize it might be true. Then, he suddenly knelt down, begging for forgiveness. Your father was a big company president? And you have passive income too. You never mentioned any of this when we met for family gathering. I wouldn't, would I? I thought you'd be blinded by the money, so I kept it a secret. Seeing his reaction, I could tell he was astounded by the news of my inheritance, given his tendency to be obsessed with money. He kept insisting I was wrong. I'll break up with her and make you and our daughter happy this time, let's remarry, even as I selected items and stood in line at the checkout. But in the end, I ignored him completely, calling a taxi to take the long way home. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected call from my ex-husband. Hesitating whether to answer, the call connected as I was handling my phone. His voice, noticeably diminished, came through, "Help me." Curious about his situation, I listened and couldn't help but laugh at the story. It turned out, Linda had divorced him, having had an affair with another man. Furthermore, the child wasn't his but her lover's, and she left him to be with her new partner, especially after seeing him grovel to me. Initially angry about her infidelity, my ex-husband was silenced by Linda's retort, "What? You married me after your own affair. Plus, you're cheating right now, too. You're no better than I am, so you have no right to judge me." Fooled into signing the divorce papers, Linda took everything from their home the next day while he was at work. Desperate, he called me for help. I felt embarrassed for ever having liked such a man. At the same time, I was glad I divorced him before he fell apart. So what? Just because you got divorced, you think I'd get back with you? I responded. After a moment of silence, he made an outrageous suggestion, "I'm the only father our daughter has. You won't be looked down on as a single mom if a good man like me is with you. Let's remarry. And, since I'm being sued for alimony, it'd help if you could cover that." Fed up with his persistent remarriage talk, and having never been demeaned for being a single mom, I was about to hang up when he pleaded, "Wait. Please. A father and husband are essential for a woman and child. I decided to end this for good. You, who haven't even paid the alimony for your affair, have no right to play the father. I haven't taken action yet, but I've changed my mind. There's still time before the statute of limitations, so expect to pay up." When I confronted him, my ex-husband fell silent. He probably never expected the conversation about his affair and the subsequent alimony to come up again. After that, he went quiet, so I finally hung up the phone. I blocked his number and immediately went to my lawyer's office. We prepared the documents and once again demanded that my ex-husband quickly pay the alimony. Weeks later, his parents, having heard about the situation, traveled all the way from afar to hand me a thick, brown envelope. When I looked surprised, my mother-in-law said, "For the trouble our foolish son has caused. It's our responsibility too. We're sorry for leaving you to deal with this alone, even though we didn't know anything, Hazel. My son has been causing a scene, saying he trusts no one, which led to a police matter, and that's when we were first informed. We're so sorry, Hazel," said my father-in-law, as they both looked remorseful, handing over the envelope. I was told that my ex-husband was currently hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and couldn't rejoin society for the foreseeable future. It seems the demands for alimony and the truth about Linda's affair took a toll on his mental health. After some thought, I returned the envelope to them. As they stood there in shock, I said with a shy smile, "The only person I want to see make amends is Fred himself. Besides, I live in this small apartment, but I have enough income. Even if my daughter decides to go to a private medical school, I can fully support her tuition. There's no need for you to dip into your retirement funds to make amends. Your words alone have shown me your sincerity." By the time I finished speaking, they were both crying and kept apologizing. Then, after reuniting with my daughter who had just returned from school for the first time in a while, they said they would take the last bullet train home. Seeing such brave parents, I could no longer feel anything but amazement towards my ex-husband who continued to cause trouble till the very end. And though I never recovered the alimony or the remaining child support from my ex-husband, I'm okay with that. Because he is still struggling mentally, unable to even have a proper conversation. It seems he is still panicked about having to pay me and Linda the alimony. Having assets and recently remarried to a wonderful man, moving from an apartment to our own home, I'm living a happy life. Perhaps this is for the best. I think my ex-husband should just reflect on his mistakes and live with them.